What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It is Thursday, January 25th, 2018. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Well, big breaking news. This hit the wires just about an hour. Destroying evidence. Obstruction of justice. And the Department of Justice Inspector General said, well, no, we had copies of all this stuff last summer, and I think it's still around here. And they've now confirmed that they've located every single missing text message for this critical 5-month period between FBI agent Peter Strzok and FBI lawyer Lisa Page, who were expressing anti-Trump sentiments on their work time. And it's okay for them not to like Trump, but the degree of bias, it was obvious it was influencing their work, and that cannot be allowed. But apparently, the Inspector General over at the Department of Justice, Horowitz, has obtained hundreds of other high-level text messages from the FBI-issued mobile devices of other FBI as well as Department of Justice officials involved in pre-election investigations. And this may be why we're seeing all these recent resignations and reassignments. People are trying to get out of the target zone, as it were. And again, if Peter Strzok and Lisa Page wanted to trade anti-Trump sentiment, they should have done it on their own devices. They were using taxpayer-funded property to basically bash the President of the United States of America. And apparently, the real story, though, is that there was this 7th floor club that met every Wednesday to plot the overthrow of the Trump administration. And that's really the meat that's inside there. Now, getting on over to the Feyza Memo, this is turning into a fist fight. It's apparently some of the information is already starting to leak out. Now, this memo is highly classified. It's been shown to every House member. All the House members have been sworn to secrecy, but somebody talked because, according to this article coming out of 12160, the Feyza Memo officially names James Comey, Andrew McCabe, and Rod Rosenstein. And Rosenstein, rather. And I'm sure they've got to be very nervous about that. So Trey Gowdy is saying, the FBI corruption plot thickens. Hannity's out there saying the walls are closing in on the deep state, and then he went to say game on, or the glove is up, or the game is afoot, whatever metaphor you want to use here. Now, the Department of Justice came on out basically saying that it would be extremely dangerous to national security to make this memo on alleged surveillance abuse public. It would be extremely reckless. And this was Stephen Boyd, the Assistant Attorney General for Legislative Affairs, in a letter to Nunes on yesterday. Here's the problem. Nobody at the Department of Justice has read the memo yet. A lot of the people who are out there screaming, you can't let this out, they don't know what's in there. They only know what they themselves have done, and they're worried about it being in there. So Trey Gowdy came on back and said it's time to lower the rhetoric and stop saying all this doom and gloom to national security. Basically, people are worried about their jobs. Even the Senate Intelligence Committee has not been given access to Nunes' Feyza Memo. That's how tight they are trying to control it. And I think the longer they delay releasing it, the more time it gives the Democrats and the media a time to muddy the water, which I think that they already tried to do by releasing that 99-page memo and saying that was the Feyza Memo. And Alex Jones had it up there and said, "Look at me, I've got the memo." And he had a memo, 99-pager. This article that I'm looking at about the Senate Intelligence Committee, this is out of CNN, no less, and basically says that this 4-page Feyza Memo is based on highly classified intelligence information. Now, there was nothing classified in that 99-page document. Therefore, this 4-page memo is something new. It's not just a summary of that April 2017 99-page document. There's other stuff in there, stuff that's classified. I think that 99-page document was put on out so everybody would read it and say, there's nothing there. Big nothing burger. I mean, there's some stuff in there. Highly questionable stuff. Illegal stuff. Judge Napolitano is saying that if the Feyza Memo lays out lawless actions, its contents should be disclosed on the floor of the House of Representatives. Yes, it should. We, the people, have a right to know what all of these FBI agents and Justice Department officials and all these other people are doing while working on our taxpayer dime. Because it's very clear they're not doing the job we're expecting them to do. And firings are in order. Remember, we're their boss. They all work for us. The government is like a custodian that we have hired and entrusted with the nation's sovereignty. And their job is to empty the trash cans and clean the windows and, fix the cracks in the tile and other stuff like that. They're not allowed to just go on out and start sitting around our office building watching porn or playing politics, and certainly not grabbing the office equipment and selling it out the back door. We're their boss. We the people need to remember, we're their boss. And we have a right to basically get this government back under our control or fire it. It's like it says in the Declaration of Independence, when a long train of abuses and usurpations events are designed to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government. That's what we're looking at here. We're going to do a shout out now to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining the network, and we're going to take a phone call from Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha, Kevin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Kevin, are you there? Kevin, one more time.
Kevin dropped.
Kevin dropped. Oh, okay. All right. Poor Kevin. All right. Getting on back to the news here. Now, I'm not the only person who's concerned about the long delay in getting this memo out. People are interested. People want to see what the FBI and Department of Justice has been doing. But attention spans are short. And Paul Craig Roberts is out here with this article saying that this needs to be released now. This needs to get on out, and people need to start moving on it. The longer the Republicans delay, they're literally sitting on evidence that clears Trump in this Russia collusion story, and they need to get it on out there. And the longer they wait, the more the Democrats and the corporate media and the deep state, the more time they're going to have to undermine the story and basically try and make it go away, which clearly they want to do. When you hear this insane rhetoric coming from top officials of the Department of Justice. It's a threat to national security, and even worse, I could lose my job. Even worse, you could go to jail. Now, apparently, even the Feyza court is now out there saying that the surveillance that was being done by the NSA, the CIA, and the FBI was outside the law that created the Feyza court, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. And apparently they've issued their own report saying the U.S. government has not been in compliance with procedures governing the acquisition of data from spying. Moreover, the full scope of noncompliance has not been previously disclosed to the court. Okay, looks like Kevin is back. Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike. It's being reported that the DOJ have miraculously found these text messages that I don't even believe ever went missing. I think they were hidden.
Well, no. What happened was last summer, the Department of Justice was starting to look into this whole issue with Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, and they got copies of all the text messages. And even when the FBI came out with the claim that they'd accidentally deleted all the text messages, the Department of Justice said, no, we've got them. They're over here. And today they just confirmed it.
Yeah, absolutely. This whole mess. I consider this to be a four-part coup d'etat. A was right after the election. They wanted to the electoral college and then the recount. B, the Russian canard, which that narrative has fallen apart. C, they were trying to use the 25th Amendment. That's now fell apart. D, and this is especially where I wanted to get at, with these text messages, they're threatening physical violence at the president.
Yes, they are.
Man,
that's a felony.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, desperate people do desperate things, and these people are desperate.
They are. They are.
mean,
And President Trump has got to put on his presidential brass knuckles and get to work on these people by all legal means. And I know he's up against a huge amount of bureaucratic resistance. I don't even know how much of this he's aware of, because, he's surrounded by people who are trying to filter all the information that gets to the president. And I can imagine that just like corporate media, they're not mentioning all of this stuff.
No, absolutely not. I mean, everybody in D.C., and I hate to say this, but everybody is dirty with the Clinton autocracy. Even going back, to when they were co-governors, down in Arkansas. I mean, this scandal is the scandal of a lifetime. I don't understand how people are sitting by idly and not, putting their head in the sand and not paying attention. I'm thankful for people like you in the independent media getting this news out there. I mean, this is huge, and heads need to roll. I really do. People need to be fired over this, jailed over this. I mean, sedition, absolutely. Treason, I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, it's looking like it.
Well, we're missing the component of giving aid and comfort to an enemy in a time of war, so it doesn't meet the legal definition of treason. But this behavior violates several sections of Title 18, including rebellion and insurrection. And as I'm already mentioned, it is against the law merely to threaten the life of the president, which these FBI people were doing. But what we're seeing exposed is an entire culture of corruption that permeates the FBI, the Department of Justice, and probably most of the other institutions of the federal government. And that is the real story. We're not getting the government we thought we were getting. We're not getting the government we pay for. What we're getting is a crime spree. We're funding a crime spree by the politicians in our nation's capital.
Yep. I mean, and the other thing, too, when they were bringing out that they were doing a secret society in through the FBI and everything, the thing that stuck out in my head the most was Kennedy's speech about the very word secrecy is repugnant. I think people need to remember that he said that. He said those words. Because it is repugnant. We don't need this in this country.
No, we really don't here, and we don't need secret societies inside our intelligence agencies, although we know that CIA is full of Skull and Bones alumni. It seems to be a postgraduate situation where a lot of CIA began at Skull and Bones.
Absolutely. Well, that's all I wanted to talk about to you today, sir. I hope you have a great and wonderful day, and give Miss Claire best wishes, and hopefully, you don't have to keep sending her to the doctor.
Well, we're not out of the woods here just yet, but I'm seeing some progress, but she's still in a lot of pain. And because of this opioid crisis, now all of a sudden everybody's being stingy with pain medications. Oh, we can't do this, we can't do that. And, we've got her an appointment with a regular doctor at Straub, but they're so messed up with the flu. Claire's appointment isn't until May. And so trying to get through from now to May with some kind of realistic pain management, that's what we're working on right now. So thanks a lot.
This flu crisis,
say again?
You don't think this flu crisis could be them engineering a bioweapon to distract from all of this coming out, do you?
Well, it's no secret that USAMRIID has been weaponizing influenza for years now. There have even been a couple of accidents. You know, I joke about somebody dropping a test tube at the bioweapons lab. There have actually been a couple of accidental releases, and they had to deal with a lot of very sick people around these various bioweapons labs. So who really knows? I remember back in 2009 when we were dealing with the when pigs fly flu, which was a combination of human flu with swine flu and bird flu. And then I found a paper from the CDC from 3 years before where they were making this thing in the lab. So they play with some very dangerous stuff here. Anyway, listen, I'm going to let you go here. Going to get back here to the news. Phone lines are open here. So basically, we have evidence that these intelligence agencies are basically just, they've all gone rogue. FBI talking about overthrowing the president. CIA just causing trouble all over the world. NSA looking for blackmail information on everybody that they can. And amazingly enough, in this recent emergency spending bill, the one that only lasts 3 weeks, apparently the funding for the intelligence agencies basically kneecapped congressional ability to oversee covert actions and surveillance programs. And apparently there was a bit of a fight over that language, where the intelligence program, the intelligence agencies are trying to break free. They want to run the country. J. Edgar Hoover thought he did. When J. Edgar Hoover was lifetime chief of the FBI, he used to call his office the seat of the American government. Too many big egos inside Washington, D.C. Here's an interesting thing. Senator Mark Warner yesterday was out there saying that the classified report compiled by the House Intelligence Committee, which he admits he has not seen, is sloppy and baseless, careless. It's got no grounding in fact. And then does not explain how he could know that it's sloppy, reckless, has no grounding in fact, when he himself has not seen it yet. But the Democrats are clearly afraid. Okay, so Sessions Department of Justice moves to protect the deep state, warns against releasing the Feyza Memo without an FBI review. In other words, they're setting this thing up where this memo will be redacted to protect the guilty. What we're looking at here, though, is a major crime. The crime of rebellion or insurrection in the ranks of the FBI and the Department of Justice. Now, getting on back to the FBI saying it accidentally deleted the messages or lost them. The dog ate my homework. Look how many times we've seen that over the years. Lois Lerner. Oh, the hard drive crashed. I didn't have a backup. NSA, oh, we can't find the data. State Department is going to take 75 years to collate Hillary Clinton's emails. And have you noticed that every time one of these government agencies destroys evidence, which is what's really going on about here, the corporate media acts like that's no big deal. You know, everybody loses stuff. This is supposed to be the government. And if they can't do the job, maybe it's time to replace them. If they are that incompetent, yeah, let's shut it down and start building a whole new government from the ground up. I think it's an idea whose time has come. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And for those of you who would like to support Republic Broadcasting, keep us on the air, keep getting the truth out, especially right now when we more need to stand up to the deep state. With all the stuff that's coming out, with the Feyza Memo and the texts and the seventh floor group, literally part of the FBI working to overthrow the president, this is the fight. This could be the final battle. And we need your help and your support. So if you want to send in a check or money order, the postal address is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. If you'd like to call on in and become a recurring subscriber, the number is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And again, right now, there's never been a greater need for Republic Broadcasting or for WhatReallyHappened.com to be out there and visible to the public, to get the truth out about what's going on. All right, we're going to take a phone call now. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I just wanted to remind everybody that of mere, 3 or 4 years ago, under Obama, when Senator Dianne Feinstein was the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Oversight Committee, that the torture report, which was several 100,000 pages long, distilled into 5,000 pages, finally distilled into 500, and was going to be released. The intelligence agencies didn't want that released, just like they don't want the Feyza Memo released. And they did everything they could to stop it from being released, and indeed it never was. But among the things that they did, Mike, I know you remember, is the CIA and the NSA actually bugged the committee rooms and the staffers of the oversight committee that were charged with overseeing the CIA and the intelligence agency.
They hacked into their computers.
They them and threatened them.
They've hacked into the computers
and
too.
Threatened them with prosecution. Yes.
Well,
and if I can also recount. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say there's a difference now, and that back then Obama was in office, and Obama basically went along with having the report kept away from the American public, because there's some nasty stuff in there, and we know that bits and pieces have leaked out about what the U.S. was doing to these people, and it was a lot worse than just waterboarding. We had those photos from Abu Ghraib and so forth. But now we have Trump in office. Trump is not well motivated to protect the intelligence agencies, and he's going to be even less so when he starts paying attention to this seventh floor group at the FBI that was literally plotting to overthrow him. And so he can simply order this Feyza Memo declassified and made public. He has that authority to do it. And I think he just might. And the only way the intelligence agencies are going to be able to stop him is to try and assassinate him.
Mike, he better do that fast. But can I recount a humorous story about Mark Warner's father, John Warner?
Yes.
Who was a senator from Virginia, also the Secretary of the Navy for a while, I believe. But I was at a party in Washington, D.C. when I was, I don't know, I was a captain or something like that, at some diplomatic thing, and having a cocktail at this elegant party, Washington party, and in walks John Warner, Senator John Warner, who, and on his arm was his wife at the time, who was Elizabeth Taylor, the actress.
Yes.
It was about her 10th wedding or something. And the comment that this very senior officer said to me was, and this is not going to be swearing, but here's what he said. This is what he said. Here come the three biggest tits in Washington.
Okay.
So anyways,
I hadn't heard that one.
That story. Yeah. Anyways, but that's the if Trump doesn't, again, we keep saying, everybody, all the callers keep saying, take the gloves off. You got to fight these guys bare knuckle.
Yeah.
He can order the release of his memo, and why he doesn't is beyond me.
Well, again, he's surrounded by a staff that just filters everything that gets to him. And he may be no more informed than Americans who are still watching television news and not going online. Somebody needs to put this all over his Twitter feed. But yeah, it's a mystery. It's a mystery why he's not taking action here.
Maybe remember the story 2 months ago, Mike, where apparently there were some Marine units that surrounded Langley.
Yeah, I wasn't able to confirm that one.
Yeah, I'm. That's the kind of thing that may need to be done, but they're completely.
You're talking Civil War there, and I've got a problem with that one. All right, listen, we're going to tell you what. Stay on the line. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. But stay on the line. I'm going to come back to you. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking with Peter in Los Angeles, and we're talking about the rogue, out-of-control intelligence agencies, and even all the way back at the end of World War II, when Harry Truman basically allowed the OSS to become the CIA. He recognized there was a danger because in modern history, intelligence agencies or secret police or whatever you want to call them, they basically come to the point of thinking they know what's best and they're going to run the country. And certainly, while Adolf Hitler remained at the top of the food chain in Nazi Germany, the Gestapo and the SS were basically running the country, and the civilian government had very little say. So it is a problem. And why do we need 17 intelligence agencies anyway? Why can't just one do it all? And certainly that would save a lot of money. We found out this last year that in addition to the NSA's authoring all of this cyber malware to infect Americans' computers with, the CIA was doing exactly the same thing to gain the same exact access. Duplication of effort, twice as much money, twice as much manpower. We can't afford that kind of waste.
I think part of it, Mike, is they've been afraid of that, and they want parallel checks on each other. I think that, like bureaucratic rivals. Can I bring something? There was back in after the fall of France in World War II, and I know I've heard you speaking before. I know you know who I'm talking about. A Brit was sent over here, a millionaire industrialist, Canadian guy, but a British guy named Sir William Stevenson, and he set up an intelligence center in One Rockefeller Plaza in Rockefeller Center in New York, and he ran. Matter of fact, I understand it's still classified what he did. The man called Intrepid was,
Yes.
And what they were doing was interfering in the election. Any of the isolationists, they would, or people who were sympathetic to Germany or whatever, they were ruthlessly, dirty tricked and set up and so on and so forth. And so even going back then, before we had formal intelligence agencies outside of the military services, they were still using that politically, even
Yes.
foreigners. So I don't know why they do that, have 17 other than to be rivals with each other and maybe make us a little safer.
Well, I don't know about that. Certainly, the CIA and the FBI are rivals, even though technically FBI is domestic intelligence only, and CIA is supposed to be foreign intelligence only. It's like the way the Soviet Union set up. KGB was external security, and GRU was internal security. But there's a competition, and they openly cross into each other's territories. There are now FBI offices around the world. And yeah, there's a rivalry going on. But a lot of these other intelligence agencies have just sort of been split off to have a little specialty niche that maybe nobody else wanted. The Defense Industrial Security Agency and things like that. But it's a big part of the cancer that is consuming our nation. We don't need that many spies. If we're gonna, and first of all, the failure rate is so very, very high. The CIA totally missed the Soviets going into Afghanistan, and again, at my COINTELPRO page, I have two of the major failures of the FBI. They were handed the complete blueprint for the Japanese attack here on Pearl Harbor in August of 1941, and the FBI decided it was junk and threw it in the trash. Well done, FBI. That's protecting the nation.
remember the intelligence, not just the CIA, but all of them, they missed the fall of the Soviet Union as well.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, they set up that red team situation, which was they had set up an alternate team of analysts that always would give us the worst case scenario. And that was the scenario they always went with. So there may be analysts inside there, but they were bureaucratically set up to have an opposing red team that always gave the worst case, among which, the Soviet Union is not going to do anything, the Soviet Union, whatever the worst case was, and the best case for the military-industrial complex, that's what the red team always espoused, and that's where they always went with the actual dollars, and, so it needs to be really exploded, Mike.
Well, this may be the spark. This may be the spark, and I hope Donald Trump is aware of what's going on with these text messages. We don't even know if that's really Donald posting to his Twitter account. I think one possible explanation for the lack of Trump seeming to do anything to drain the swamp is he's literally being shown a view of the world that is highly filtered. They're controlling the information, getting to him as a means to control how he's thinking and what he does. And I think that's what's going on. Peter, thank you very much for the phone call and for your insights and for the humor. And we're going to go now to Larry in Indiana. Aloha, Larry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi there, Mike. I'm sorry. I just can't see Trump as a good guy. I mean, candidate Trump said that he was against war. He was against ISIS. He was going to destroy ISIS. And thanks to a lot of the links I've got from your website, we know that Trump is doing exactly the same thing that Obama was doing. He's aiding ISIS. He's rescuing ISIS commanders, rescuing them, moving them around, pointing them at the Russians, trying to continue to cause trouble in Syria, as Israel has been doing. He continues to coddle Israel, who was deeply involved with 9/11, as was our CIA. He hasn't said a word of truth about that, nor a word of truth about Sandy Hook. We haven't heard a word of truth about what happened in Vegas. He continues to install Goldman Sachs banksters in place and coddle the same type of people, in the Treasury Department.
Well, we don't need to go down the entire laundry list. I'll be the first one to admit I'm very disappointed in Donald Trump. But on the other hand, I still think things would have been a lot worse if Hillary had won the Oval Office. The one thing that we have right now is that Donald Trump isn't going to keep these cover-ups in place on all this deep state corruption, and we could see the whole system start to break down. I've been speculating for quite a long time that the eventual fate of the United States is a Soviet Union-style collapse, and it might happen on Trump's watch.
Am I still on?
You're still on.
Okay. Well, I mean, he's got a guy working with him named Peter Thiel. These guys are big into artificial intelligence. They treat us like sheep. They're running scenarios against us. My opinion is they've got the media attacking him on such stupid issues. It's actually generating support for him as he continues the globalist warmongering agenda. I mean, look at what happened in Ukraine. That was Biden, the Democrats, Obama, that Victoria Nuland, her Zionist hubby, Robert Kagan, and Trump is doing the exact same things, continuing to give them deadly military weapons. Everything he's doing now as president is anathema to what he did as candidate Trump, just like all the rest of them.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you. Yeah. Okay, he's been a disappointment.
He put Sessions in there.
Okay,
he put Sessions in there. So he knew what kind of a deep state potted plant Sessions was in the first place, so he's got the ability to gripe about the fact that Sessions isn't doing anything, and yet he could fire him. He could get somebody in there that would. She should have put Trey Gowdy in there. Somebody like that. We need
Larry
somebody
Klayman,
that's going
Tom
to make
Fitton.
America.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem. Here's the problem. Trump,
America great, not Israel. He's too beholden to Israel.
Larry, yeah. My turn. There's one problem with what you're suggesting. Okay, Donald Trump is already under fire for letting the former chief of the FBI go because Robert Mueller is trying to somehow morph that into an obstruction of justice case. He's trying to basically say that the only reason that Trump fired former Director Comey was to interfere with the investigation into Trump's collusion with Russia. And
I understand that, but you can't drain the swamp if you keep putting swamp critters back in there.
Well, I've said that before, that Trump's big mistake is instead of draining the swamp, he's hiring the alligators into the staff positions. All right, Larry, we're going to let you go and switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how you doing, Mike?
Doing okay.
Yeah, like we talked about this over and over about when Trump came in, he should have cleared out everybody. Trump needs to set up like a firewall. And the first thing he should do is fire everybody in the FBI. You don't, peeling back an onion to another layer is just another problem. So he's going to have to get rid of everybody in the FBI and start anew immediately. So have somebody not in Washington start as the director of the FBI. And then after you do that, he's got his firewall, and then continue to the NSA, and then to the CIA, and then probably to the DIA. And, after that, if he's still around, then you continue that. But getting rid of a couple people in the FBI and all that is not going to help because they're within each group. It's compartmentalized. So you're going to have to get rid of everybody and give them lie detector tests. They get lie detector tests anyway. But he's going to have to throw the whole onion away, Mike. Not peel, you just can't keep peeling pieces back. It's just too late for that. They're everywhere, Mike. It's just layer.
I know, I know, and we've been hearing about that for years. I remember when TWA 800 went down, and the FBI was out there again destroying evidence, covering up evidence. There was when Frederick Whitehurst, he was the head of the FBI's crime lab, and he blew the whistle, saying that the FBI crime lab routinely rigged the results of forensics tests to favor the prosecution. And that resulted in a lot of mistrials and retrials and people being let go. The gentleman who married Claire and I, minister, happened to be in Oklahoma when the Oklahoma bombing occurred, and he drove on over to volunteer to help search for survivors, and they made him show his ID something like 6 times before they'd let him near the building. And the one thing he came back mentioning was that while there were people obviously in the record screaming, FBI agents were just running around picking up papers and shoving them in boxes and loading them on trucks. So that's what you have here.
Yeah, because the way I figured, there's no other way. If you look, Victoria Nuland, like the previous gentleman mentioned, Ukraine. Well, she was put in by Bush, and then you got the Kagan, her husband. You got elements before her. So it's just, it's like I said, throw away the whole onion. Don't, it takes time to peel up, each layer off and picking different people. I mean, there's a lot of good people in the CIA, NSA, and the FBI, but I mean, unfortunately, Mike, sometimes good people are going to have to get canned to clear out the bad people.
Well,
and people are giving, like James Comey,
I'm a little less ruthless than you are, because I agree with that individual who called into the show that said basically good people and bad people enter the FBI, and the bad people get promoted all the way up to the top because they're willing to do the dirty tricks to get past their competition. So I think we really only need to take the top 3 levels of management off, and everybody else keeps their jobs, and I think that'll send out the message that this kind of behavior is not going to be tolerated. And obviously everybody on that 7th floor club who openly talked about violence against the sitting president of the United States, they need to go to jail, because it is against the law to threaten the life of the president. And that's exactly what these people were doing in these text messages. These are serious crimes. And this is not just abuse of an email server. This is really serious. Anyway, Dustin, thank you very much. I'm going to let you go, and we've got one more call from Francis in North Carolina. Francis, thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind today?
Hello, aloha to you both.
Aloha.
Not a problem. I tell you what, it seems like no matter who it sits on the royal throne in the District of Criminals, there's always going to be a threat of some sort, somehow, some way, somewhere, whatever have you. It never fails, depending on what's going on. That's an overall synopsis. And yes, they probably should be, jailed or whatever the case is, prosecuted, who knows what, because of what they're doing. Now, as far as the whatever definition we use for deep state or who knows what, the question is, I wonder how deep that goes. Does it go clean back to the Shrub Jr. or even further back than him and his dad and all that kind of good stuff, and Cheney and Chertoff and Rice and all that kind of good stuff?
Well, I think it would be safe to say that there has always been a degree of corruption in government going all the way back to the founding of the country. But it was small and manageable, and we could tolerate it and afford it. But starting in the 1980s, it just began to spread, and it all goes with that CIA drug running out of Arkansas, gun and drug running. Plus, they were bringing in the heroin from Vietnam at the same time as well. And all of a sudden, everybody wanted a taste. They wanted a taste of that cash flow. And so over time, the corruption has spread until it encompasses pretty much everybody inside the government. And now we're starting to see it get exposed. And that's why I'm saying it's so important for everybody to take all these stories about the Feyza Memo and these texts and just literally say, do you understand there was a subgroup in the FBI actually plotting the overthrow of the President of the United States of America? And of course, if you say that to a liberal, they're going to say, well, yes, he deserves to go. No. We are supposed to be a nation of laws. Okay? Donald Trump won the election, overcoming massive election fraud. And for good or bad, he is the president. And you don't threaten his life, and you don't plot rebellion and insurrection against him.
Well, the interesting thought is that how do we know that it did not go further back than the 80s, such as into the 70s and further back than that? However, with that being said, whether you have the criminals in charge, the National so-called Security Agency, and the Fascist Bureau of Information, or whatever you want to call it, there's no telling as to who's doing what behind whose back.
No, there really isn't.
Right.
Anyway, Francis, we got to do a commercial break here. I'm going to let you go. When we come on back, we've got another caller waiting, and then I got to get back and do more news because there's a lot more interesting stuff out there today. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take one more phone call. Kodiak up in Missouri. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I've got a really bad cell signal here, but I wanted to talk about something that has been bothering me for the last 6 months since I found it in one of our updates. To give you a little background, I own a software development company.
Yes.
And pretty much on online games, which is a multi-billion-dollar business. But I used to make game engines, and I still have some that I've retired from it. There are a few that still do updates for. And 6 months ago, I came across something in a program that I was trying to update for one of my games on. And I reported it to the FBI, and they said they didn't care. Well, basically, Microsoft and some of the online gaming giants are everybody's information.
Yes.
There's no way to prove it. The only way for them not to steal your information is you not play those games.
Well, generally I don't play those games. The only games I play are flight simulators.
Well, true. Flight simulators are not ones that you have to worry about, but do you know how many Americans and their kids play Steam games?
Yeah. And I know that there was a big story that came out about that recently. Yeah, they're vacuuming up the information, and it's going to marketers, or who knows where it's going. Yeah, there's no more privacy left in our country, and I definitely miss it. I'm a private. I have private instincts. I want to be left alone. I want to not have people watching me and listening to me, except obviously the radio show. But when I'm not on the air, I'm very private, and I work to keep it that way.
I understand that, but you know about the leaks in the Intel processors.
Oh yes, we've been talking about that.
Yes. The things that I was asked by the manufacturer that I made the game engine for an actual video game for to do an update for a security patch for Windows 10. And basically when I went in there to do this, I found out this is a Korean-based company that has this video game. And it's not us, or it's not our government that's putting this stuff in the.
Well, we know that the Intel chips are made in Israel, and the bug supposedly appeared with the Centrino, which was the first chip made in Israel. Kodiak, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with more news in hour number 2 after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, as you know, Special Counsel Mueller is going to have a talk with Donald Trump under oath. Trump has said he's perfectly happy to do that, perfectly happy to do it under oath, underscoring the fact that when Hillary was interviewed over her email server, she was not under oath. Now, Roger Stone, on the other hand, is saying this is a suicide mission and that Trump shouldn't meet Mueller because Mueller is going to just try and trick him or provoke him into saying anything that could be used to claim that Trump's firing of former FBI Director James Comey was linked to the Russian investigation. Now, logic and common sense, which are endangered species in Washington, D.C., would tell you there was nothing to interfere with. There was nothing to obstruct. Mueller has been digging at this issue for over a year and has found absolutely nothing to support it. And yet the corporate media is still running this all over the place. Trump-Russia collusion, Trump-Russia collusion. And a lot of Americans can be forgiven for believing it really did happen, even though the reality is there's no evidence. There's a big void, a big empty spot in this Russiagate. It's a huge amount of nonsense. Now, interestingly enough, do you remember when the story about Hillary's private email server broke into the public? And that she was using this private weak server for government business classified information. And Obama came out on TV and said he had no idea. Said he'd heard it on the TV news himself. It was a complete shock to him. Well, it turned out that Obama was lying, as usual, and that apparently Obama was sending messages to Hillary on her private email server. And some of those messages contained classified information. And the reason the Department of Justice and the FBI gave Hillary that get-out-of-jail-free card was if she'd gone down for Title 18 felony violations, inevitably it would have come on out that President Obama himself had committed the same offenses. Negligent exposure of classified information to an insecure environment. So it looks like the decision to protect Hillary Clinton, to protect her from the law, goes all the way up to the very top, to Obama himself. Now then, as you know, there is a new movie out called The Post, and it is an attempt to remind everybody what a wonderful newspaper the Washington Post has been in the past. And it purports to tell the story of one of two shining moments in the Washington Post's history. The first being the Pentagon Papers, which this movie is about, and the other one, of course, being Watergate. But I found this review over in Consortium News saying that people who recall the real story of Daniel Ellsberg and the burglary of his psychiatrist's office by Nixon's people and all of that stuff, they're going to be disappointed. Because apparently, and this is a direct quote from the story, from the article, evidently Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg weren't interested in a movie based on the story. Instead, they produced a movie, The Post, depicting a very different set of events. In other words, the movie that was supposed to glamorize the Washington Post's better moment is itself a piece of propaganda. They're trying to rewrite history. So, I like Tom Hanks, and I like most of what Spielberg has done, but I think I'm going to take a pass on this one. Now, speaking of media lies, over at Activist Post, they have an article, "We Need Another Chilcot Inquiry, This Time into Syria." Now, if you remember, the war in Iraq was justified with a claim that Saddam had nuclear weapons of mass destruction, that he was getting ready to attack Europe in just 45 minutes, that he had germs, he had chemicals, he had all this stuff out there. And of course, once the war was over and Saddam Hussein had been lynched, it was very obvious he'd never had any of these weapons. It was all a big lie to get us to go to war against a country that hadn't actually done anything to the American people other than want to sell their oil for the euro instead of the dollar. Well, we need the Chilcot inquiry basically looked into where did all of this false information come from, who was involved, what journalists basically sold out their integrity to push this story, and they came back with a report. And now we need a new one because we have been propagandized several different ways regarding the continuing war in Syria. You know, at first it was Assad's a cruel dictator and a tyrant. We have an obligation to save the Syrian people from him. Then they were out there that Assad was gassing his own people, which made absolutely no sense. And then when that one didn't work, there was the U.S. said, well, we're not really at war with Syria. We're there to get ISIS and al-Qaeda. And for some reason, the American planes kept missing ISIS and al-Qaeda and hitting critical Syrian infrastructure, at which point the Russians stepped on in and showed just how easy it was to get ISIS and al-Qaeda out of Syria. And so now the U.S. is back once again saying, well, we have evidence that Assad is gassing his own people. The lies just keep going on and going on. And at some point, yeah, we need an official commission that is going to say, these people lied to you. These officials lied, these media outlets lied to get you to go to a war. And by the way, I consider lying your population into war the highest possible high crime and misdemeanor that a leader can commit against his own country. That's the top of it. It has every other crime in there, every other sin in there. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. The Syrian military is deploying reinforcements to northern Hama and eastern Idlib, and they're preparing to clear what's called the Abu al-Duhur pocket. Just clean it all right on out. And meanwhile, down at the border with Turkey, Kurdish forces have repelled another attack of the Turkish armed forces and the Turkish-backed Free Syria Army, but they have been driven out of the village of Abudan. So that is going on. This is going to go on a lot longer than I think Erdogan thought might be the case. Now, the Afrin Self-Administration Office, like City Hall, has published a statement calling out the Syrian army to enter Afrin and protect it from the Turkish invasion. I don't see that as happening. Assad is just winding up one war. He doesn't want to get into another one. And at this point, I think the Kurds are learning a lesson so many other former U.S. allies have learned. They're being abandoned. They're being abandoned. And they're caught between Syrian forces. They're caught between the Turkish forces. And it's going to be a bloodbath here. Meanwhile, 2 U.S. military advisors have been killed by a Turkish airstrike. And Syrian media reported that in Afrin, the result of the airstrike of the Turkish military aircraft, 2 advisors from the United States were killed. The Pentagon has not yet commented. Meanwhile, Trump, responding to this report, called up Erdogan and asked him to please exercise caution and avoid targeting U.S. forces in Syria. This from the leader of the country that was not particularly selective about targets in Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria or Libya or Yemen. Now, interestingly enough, Iran is now offering an alliance with Russia to counter the United States in the Middle East. Remember the other day we were talking about how all of a sudden Syria was talking with Iran, Iraq, and with Turkey about forming a military coalition to counter the growing Saudi encroachment in the region. So now the sides are firming on up for a regional war there. More gratuitous propaganda, more booga-booga. The British Army chief is saying Russia can destroy Great Britain sooner than expected. So the head of the British Army, Nick Carter, said that Moscow is capable of taking hostile actions against the United Kingdom and NATO much earlier than expected. And he says the conflict may begin unexpectedly. Sounds like prepping for a false flag. Remember when they were pushing the war on Iraq, phony Tony Blair got up there on TV and said, Saddam can attack us with chemical weapons with only 45 minutes notice. We're still heading for war. And another indicator of that, this is out of Pravda, the U.S. is preparing Russia's neighbors for World War III. Specialists of the U.S. Department of Defense intend to study the infrastructure of Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, Finland, and Poland for their readiness for wartime conditions. The Pentagon needs the data to understand the logistics networks and supply chains in time of war and emergency situations. So it sounds like they're getting serious. They're doing the planning to put entire countries on a wartime footing. Now, if you have a grandparent who was alive in World War II, you might want to ask them what life was like in this country. You know, forget about asking front lines and all that. We've seen that documented many times. But just ask them about the shortages, the metal drives, the ration cards, and just how tightly things were controlled to get an idea of what is about to happen here. Now, Russia's foreign ministry has officially accused the United States of plotting to spark off major riots during the 2018 elections, which I think are coming up in March. But apparently they've detected the United States making covert transfer of monetary assets to opposition groups in Russia. In other words, they're trying another covert destabilization and regime change. But Russia's onto them, and I don't think it's going to work. The U.S. only succeeds half the time when they try this stunt. And there's always a backlash. And then when the people of these countries that we're mucking about with don't like us, we're told, oh, they only hate us for our freedoms. The rest of the world wants to be just like us. No, they don't. I've seen much of the rest of the world. The rest of the world wants to be like they already are. Now, apparently, Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis has just released a new National Defense Strategy document from the Pentagon. And it's basically declared that the war on terror is no longer the top military priority, Our top military priority, as declared by Mattis, is to maintain a qualitative military edge over Russia and China. We've got to keep Russia and China down. What does that translate to? Oh, more money for more expensive weapons that look threatening and don't actually work. So basically, all of those war hawks and defense contractors who were longing for the good old days of the Cold War, they've got it back. They've got it back. And Trump has accepted this report from Mattis and basically says maintaining a military advantage over China and Russia is now Defense Secretary Mattis' top priority. So they're going to be screaming for more money, even more money for weapons. But who's causing all the trouble in the world right now? It's not Russia. Russia's not invading anybody. China's not invading anybody. I mean, they're glaring at Taiwan. The U.S. is the aggressor. The U.S. is the provocateur across the globe. And now they want more money to go up against Russia and China. They're really not going to be happy until they have a global war. They're not going to be happy until there are mushroom clouds just popping up all over the place. And I've studied the numbers. I've done the calculations. If you're living anywhere close, I mean, one mushroom cloud can seriously ruin your whole afternoon. Now, back when Obama was president, he sought to reinvigorate U.S. influence across Asia-Pacific, and he called it the pivot to Asia, and was basically extending the same old tired U.S. policies, democracy promotion, rights advocacy, and increasingly meaningless economic and military ties between Washington's and the nations of Southeast Asia. And apparently, these nations are getting very tired of being messed with. They're tired of the pivot. They're tired of U.S. messing around. And apparently, relations with Cambodia are starting to deteriorate. I have an idea. It's a radical idea. How about the U.S. government proves how butch they are by fixing up this country? Bring home all of our soldiers, shut down all those military bases, and let's work on making this. And let's leave those other countries alone. Let's leave those other countries alone to live their lives as they see fit. Let's bring all of our military back, bring all the hardware back, start fixing our roads, our rivers, dams rather, our rail system, get the water systems operating at capacity and healthy tap water. There are serious problems with this country that are being ignored in this insane rush to a global war. Unless their plan is to simply get into a war that they're going to lose, let Russia and China blow the entire country up, melt it down to green glass, and then start building on top of that all over again. Cheapest possible demolition they could find, a nuclear bomb. All right, Trump is now in Davos. He's courting foreign investors to come build businesses in the United States, which sounds like a really good idea to do, except that at least one that was mentioned involved a fully automated factory. That's not going to create jobs, except for the service technicians here. But Trump at Davos is basically, he's proving once again he's Israel's puppet. He's wagging his finger at the Palestinian authorities and saying, no peace talks, no money. And at this point, the Palestinian Authority seems about ready to say, you can keep your money. You're not a legitimate arbiter of peace in this country any longer. Apparently, Trump's arrival at the World Economic Forum did not go smoothly. There were rallies being held and protests, a lot of signs out there. And apparently, Air Force One had to use the airport at Zurich. There are 4 airports that are used for all the private planes that come to the World Economic Forum. He used the one at Zurich, and apparently there were activists shouting slogans and holding signs. And apparently in Switzerland, there's literally a law. You must have a permit for a protest. These protesters did not, so the police took them away. Now, basically, when it was her time to speak at Davos, Angela Merkel went on the attack against Trump and basically declared that a stronger European Union is needed to take on the United States. So it looks like our good friendship with our good buddies Germany is over, and Merkel is now talking about an EU that is able to stand up to the United States. And that reminds me, boy, this happened, I think, all the way back in the 1990s. It was just after I'd started doing my blog. And there was this Japanese industrialist who wrote this article, A Japan That Can Say No. And it was the same sentiments, that this many years after World War II, it was time for Japan to develop the ability to say no to the United States. So it was the beginning of a trend, and it does look like the United States is an empire in decline. The trick now is to avoid having it blow up the entire world before it falls into its grave. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and getting on back to the domestic front here. A story just came up on the Political Insider. Senator Chuck Grassley is getting ready to release the transcripts regarding the Trump Tower Russia meeting. And this is probably going to be the end of that particular investigation. Now, Grassley is an ally of Trump. He's not going to do something that's going to harm Trump. And basically what we're going to find out, and we'd already heard this before, that meeting at Trump Tower with Donald Jr., which was described as treasonous by Steve Bannon, was all about the Magnitsky Act. And this Russian female lawyer apparently was set up to be the representative. They manufactured a meeting, and then they tried to turn it into something nefarious. But if Grassley's releasing the transcripts, that's, to me, signals it's another nothing burger. It's another nothing burger. All right, getting on back to the international news. Apparently, Israel has decided that Ukraine is now the most anti-Semitic country. I guess they've got a little scorecard, and, you know, the higher you are on it, the more money you have to send over to Israel. And basically, they're saying this is the second year in a row where Ukraine records the largest number of reported incidents in terms of anti-Semitic propaganda and vandalism against Jewish objects, such as cemeteries, Holocaust memorials, and community buildings, blah, 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 blah. At this point, Israel has just overplayed that anti-Semitism card. We're sick and tired of hearing about it. We're tired of the whining. We're tired of the whining. Tired of the crying and the wringing of the hands and the tearing of the clothes and the always asking for more money and special privileges. And we are really sick of the double standards, where Israel tells the rest of the world that you should have open borders while they're closing their own. That Israel demands the world recognize their right to exist while denying that same right to everybody around them. We're sick and tired of Israel defying UN resolution after UN resolution after UN resolution, and I wish they would just sit down and shut the heck up. Somebody actually once wrote me and said, why do you focus so much of your website and radio show on Israel? And I said, because Israel is being annoying again. Now, I think I called this one correct. This is over about the Koreas. This is being reported in facti.org. Pyongyang urged South Korea to work together towards reconciliation and unification. They have figured out that if they don't reunify right now, the U.S. is going to come into the Korean Peninsula and make another mess of the place. Even South Korea doesn't want that. So the North Korean authorities issued a proclamation calling on all Koreans in the country and abroad to promote the contact and cooperation of North and South Korea and make this year a landmark for the history of their country. So they issued the proclamation through the North Korean news agency KCNA. Koreans are urged to unite in their efforts in an effort to improve the relations of the North and South and to move towards unification. We promote contacts, trips, and exchanges between the North and South in order to divide the divisions. I think that's a bad translation into English. And urging all compatriots to destroy the challenges on the path to unification, and that North and South themselves resolve all disputes. So there it is. They're going to reunify. There's going to be a unified Korea. This, of course, is very dangerous. The U.S. doesn't want them to reunify. And that leaves them just three options. They could assassinate one of the leaders of one of the Koreas, the way they assassinated the president of South Vietnam when he wanted to reunify the Vietnams. Or they could stage a false flag and say, oh, look what North Korea did when you were talking reunification. Or they could just haul off and go on in and start bombing North Korea before the reunification can happen. So, again, this news of reunification, this is going to yank the rug out from the U.S. desire to get into North Korea. And the U.S. does not want a unified Korea for many reasons. First of all, they make a lot more money selling weapons to South Korea to point at North Korea. And second, if the Koreas are unified, then China's One Belt, One Road project can run all the way down into Seoul, South Korea, into all the manufacturing, and Korea will be able to send their exported products to Europe much faster, much less expensive, taking business away from American and European-owned cargo shipping lines. So we'll see what's going to happen, but I would not be surprised if the U.S. just hauled off and started a war in North Korea before any more of this talk of reunification can come on out. And by the way, this is a story that you need to share with everybody because I've not seen a word of this on the corporate media. Not on the TV news. It's not on there at all. We're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I'm going to jump back up to the topic of these text messages between Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and other individuals which are now out there. And they talk about this secret society that was literally plotting within the FBI to overthrow the President of the United States of America. Now, Senate Homeland Security Committee Chairman Ron Johnson has just revealed that his committee has a whistleblower, an informant from inside the FBI itself who's confirmed this is all real. This is not somebody's idea of a joke, which the Democrats were trying to say that all this talk of a secret society, it's just their idea of a joke. I don't get it. It's not funny. Well, it doesn't matter. It's just a joke. No, it's no joke. It is no joke at all. So, getting on back to the war zones, getting on back to Korea, the good news is, and I'm going to puff my chest out here a little bit because I did call this one. The two Koreas have come out of that peace house and they're talking reunification. And they know it's going to be a fight because Pyongyang has basically come on out and said that we're going to have to smash any challenges to reunification while glaring at the United States. But it is their country. So what will the U.S. do to keep this from happening? Again, the options are assassinate one or both of the leaders. 2, flip a missile at South Korea, blame North Korea for it. Or 3, flip a missile at Hawaii and just go on in and start bombing North Korea before the Olympics are even over. But right now, the U.S. has a lot of military hardware parked off the coast of the Korean Peninsula, ostensibly to provide security for the Olympics, but it's a lot of hardware. Now, Ron Paul has come on out saying that it's best we play sports than shoot missiles at each other. So he's definitely on board with this thing, and he's saying, why is Washington so afraid of peace breaking out on the Korean Peninsula? Well, they lose arms sales. They lose shipping revenue to the One Road, One Belt project. And the U.S. just likes to keep its hand in messing around with other people's countries. And the U.S. has unveiled a whole new set of sanctions against North Korea, targeting financial and other support for the country's development of weapons of mass destruction. 16 individuals, 9 companies, and 6 ships were designated as the administration of Donald Trump put pressure on Kim Jong-un to abandon the weapons program. I don't think it's going to happen. When the Koreas reunify, South Korea is going to be glad those weapons are there, because now it means Seoul need not fear invasion by the United States. So let's talk a little bit about the economic news here. A lot of people are talking about gold and how it's going on up, and there seems to be a shortage of supplies, and why can't we get more out of the ground here? Well, there are a couple of overlapping factors. And one is that gone are the days where you could go panning in a river and pick up a decent amount of gold. You can still get some. There are still some rivers in California that are actually set aside for what is called recreational gold panning, where you get to relive the glory days of the gold rush. And you'll get a little tiny bit of gold. Enough where you can show it to people and say, look, I actually got the gold. We melted ours into Claire's wedding ring because I'm cheap. And so those days are gone. The easily reachable gold has all been swept up. And to get gold now, you have to dig down deep. And gold mining has become very expensive. And as a matter of fact, when you hear that gold is going for, say, $1,000 an ounce, the mines aren't making that. The profit margin for gold mining is very, very slim because they have to find a way to get the gold out of the gold ore. They have to purify it. They have to use environmentally friendly chemicals. In the old days, they used to use mercury. They would just drill these holes, through the gold-bearing rock, and they'd put mercury in there, which would form an amalgam with the gold. And you could literally pour it out of the rock. Then you would heat the amalgam, and the mercury would boil off, leaving the gold behind. Very simple and elegant, except that mercury is toxic. And in Coloma, California, which is where a lot of this was going on, even this many years after the gold rush, you can't drink the well water. It's all contaminated. So when gold prices go up, gold mines will reopen. When gold prices go down, gold mines will close because they can't sell the gold for enough to pay for the operation. So that's a big part of the problem. And apparently the gold market it doesn't really understand how narrow those margins are. So they're out there complaining, saying, well, we've got to have more gold. We need to replace the gold in Fort Knox here. Now, as you know, Amazon recently acquired the Whole Foods stores. And supposedly they're building a new one around here somewhere. We've already got one. It's all the way over past Diamond Head, which I know to you mainland people, that's a short drive. To us living on the island, oh man, that's so far away. It's the other side of the island. But apparently Amazon's management of Whole Foods is not working out. Their supply chain logistics have serious problems. And apparently Barclays analysts visiting the chain stores are finding shelves and displays that were completely empty. Apparently hot food bars and produce that look like they're deteriorating, which is another way of saying they're not fresh. In the firm's published research notes, they said that every department of one store they visited had high out-of-stock issues in both branded and private label items. And apparently one store on the East Coast had extraordinary inventory problems. Basics like bananas and eggs were completely unavailable or very low in stock, while entire displays and caps and refrigerated cases were empty. Now, you might be tempted to think this is a good thing because there must be more shoppers, but no. It's lost a lot of sales for the company, and it's frustrated shoppers. There's a supply chain problem, which for a company like Amazon, you'd think that's something that they understand. Although obviously the logistics to supply a supermarket are a little different. from getting an online catalog item out to the post office here. So far, since Trump took office, the American dollar has crashed to 3-year lows against other major currencies. And the greenback has touched the lowest level against major global currencies since 2015. This comes after the U.S. Treasury Secretary announced that Washington favors a weak dollar in trade. Well, yes, actually that does make sense. If you want other people to buy your products and pay dollars for them, they have to be able to get more dollars in exchange for their currencies. And I know that common sense and instinct would say we want the dollar to be worth as much as possible, but that actually can slow down trade. And very often, especially during an economic war, we see countries that are literally trying to drive down the value of their currency in the international space. Now, it's not going to change what's happening here at home, other than the fact that a weaker U.S. dollar means that products we import from other countries are now more expensive. And sadly, because our manufacturing is still lagging way behind, most of what we buy in the stores is imported products. So what's good for America's export trade is bad for the consumer, and the consumer has already been beat up on enough, I would think. Now here is a very upsetting story. Over at the Patapsco United Methodist Church near Baltimore, they got cited for a $12,000 fine for allowing homeless people to sleep on the property. And according to the citation, if they basically arrange it so the homeless can't sleep on the property, the fine will be waived. And so the church now has to decide whether to evict the homeless individuals from its grounds or pay the $12,000 county fine. And they don't really have the money to do it. Now, we had a church near here called Church of the Crossroads, and they had a policy of letting the homeless camp out on their campus at night, but then it stopped. And I'm wondering if the city government of Honolulu did the same thing. We're an island. The homeless have to go somewhere. But I guess the idea is just shove them out of sight, you know, so that the tourists don't see them, and give them money, because otherwise they'll spend that money at the tourist venues and so forth and so on. At Claire's church, which is also a United Methodist church, they were allowing the homeless to sleep on the campus, but unfortunately we were invaded by two individuals who had serious mental issues, and one of our church people was attacked, and so now they put up fences, and it's a protected facility. All right, we got a caller waiting on the line. Chuck in Texas. Aloha, Chuck. Thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I had to turn around and call in on the call-in line. I was listening on the listening line. You were talking about Whole Foods.
Yes.
And Amazon. Is the supply line problem possibly that they're starting to squeeze their suppliers, and the cost, frankly, of organic foods being higher, that they're pushing out the real organic folks, and they're just not going to supply, or can't supply at the price that Amazon is now demanding from them?
That could be part of it. I don't know that it's necessarily a plot to push out the organic food, because if they do that, Whole Foods clientele are seeking that natural, organic, healthy food. So that would be a very, very bad business decision. But you're absolutely right. Amazon may be going out to these suppliers and saying, we're only going to pay 4/5 of what you were getting from Whole Foods before. And some of these suppliers may be saying, I'm going to sell my produce elsewhere, you know, like Down to Earth. Or some of these other local markets. I'll just sell to them. That could be part of the problem. But there is a problem, and it came in with Amazon.
It really is. It sounds like the Walmart syndrome. I mean, whenever Walmart manages to get enough power and control over anyone, then they start demanding lower prices. They don't lower the prices in the store, but they demand lower prices from their suppliers. There have been many cases where Walmart has, gone in offered contracts to people and said, okay, we want your, whatever your invention or product is, and we'll give you a 1-year contract. And people are silly enough to, gear up to supply Walmart. Oh my God, and then after that year, they drop them and then buy the company and buy the product.
Yes.
This is, again, big. You get big or get out in American business today. And this is, again, falls back to the corruption of the fascist system we live in. But I think that's probably what we're seeing, where they're saying, look at all the money they were getting for these organic materials. And my God, look what people are willing to pay for this. But then they turn to the supplier and try and cut the supplier's throat and say, you want us to keep selling to us? You have to cut your price. Well, it's more expensive if you're producing organic.
Yes, it is.
Because they're not as big, they're not as large. None of the organic producers are nearly as large as our corporate farming. So they tend to be much smaller producers, and I think that's what we're seeing. And that's why I think their supply line is drying up. They're killing their supply.
That could be definitely part of the problem, but for some of the stores to not even get basics like bananas and things, whatever it is, Amazon has messed this up. And one thing that retailers understand, it takes years to build up a repeat clientele, a loyal set of customers who are going to keep coming back to your store over and over again. You alienate them and you lose them. You have to start all over from scratch, trying to court them back on it. But there's obviously a problem with Amazon. Anyway, Chuck, thank you for the update on that. And we're going to switch over to Don in the Philippines. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Yes, it's amazing to me that these guys talk to the FBI, and then they act like it's never happened before. All of a sudden, the FBI catches them in a lie, or it's not really a lie necessarily. It's an inconsistency, and they just say it's a lie because their story is not going to be exactly the same. If they talk to them for a long, long time, things will change a little bit. I saw this documentary. And this is no secret, by the way. If people have known this for a long time. I saw a documentary about the chess player Bobby Fischer.
Yes.
And his mother was, I guess, a communist, or anyway, the FBI thought she was a communist. They had a 900-page file on Regina Fischer, Bobby's mother. And his mother trained him to say, if anybody came, which they did, they would come and try to talk to him. She trained him to say one sentence to them, and don't deviate from this sentence. It was, I have nothing to say to you. So he had to repeat this over and over again, and that was his one sentence he would say to these guys. And that, and the idea was, if you deviate from that, if you say, I don't know anything about so-and-so, they can use that as a lie. If it turns out that they can prove that you did know something about it. But if you just say, so this has been known. This is back in the 50s when he was a child. So this is not a big secret.
Back in the 50s, during the heyday of McCarthy's communist hunts, the FBI had a legend for being very abusive and very manipulative. They wanted to score commies, just like today they want to score terrorists, even if they have to manufacture them out of totally innocent people. And that's another aspect of the FBI we need to remember over the last several years, is how every time there's supposedly arrest of a terrorist group, we find out that some undercover FBI informant set it all up and set these guys up as patsies to be arrested and have their faces in the newspaper and make it look like the FBI is actually fighting a war on terror. Anyway, listen, Don, I'm going to have to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We got another caller waiting on the line, and we'll be back with more news. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go back to the phones. Dave in Ohio. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I want to let you know I appreciate your show as a fellow New Hampshire native, and my wife and I look forward to listening to your program every night. I was curious what you thought was responsible for this, what I think is a really high stock market
I think it's being rigged.
That exists.
Basically, companies are buying back their own stock. The Federal Reserve has got rates so low, speculators can borrow money to buy stock, and it just has to go up a little bit. Then they can sell on out, repay the Federal Reserve with that tiny bit of interest, and they keep the extra for themselves. And it's just gaming the market up higher and higher and higher. But the problem is the underlying value is not there to support those inflated prices. And a lot of people are told sky-high stock market's a good thing. See, it's proof the economy is recovering. But a very high stock market can actually be a warning sign. Because if the market is overvalued, and it is overvalued right now, even worse than 1929, then when a correction comes, it's going to fall all the way through to the basement. And I know they've got the plunge protection team and all the money they need coming out of the Federal Reserve to keep that market looking good, but it's a fake. It's a fake. The underlying companies aren't doing as well as the stock price would suggest, just like they're messing around with the unemployment numbers. Claiming we only have 4% unemployment, when the reality is we've got almost 30% of legal American citizens willing and able to work have not been able to find work for months, if not years.
Well, I think you're exactly right. My wife and I, we moved from New Hampshire to Ohio, and Ohio, from what I can see, is a blue-collar state, and we certainly live in a blue-collar town. And this recovery, or this whatever is supposed to be reflected by the stock market, isn't happening here. And remember your age, I'm 68, so some things aren't going to happen in my lifetime. But I'm concerned about my stepsons, my wife's sons, and their kids. And people that I know around here, this isn't going to be solved in a long time. It's I don't know.
We're going to have to go through some bad times. There's going to be an economic crash and a collapse of the central government, and we're going to have to start picking up the pieces afterwards. And we're going to have to develop a sense of community, just talk with our friends and neighbors, and help each other get through some very hard times. But then on the far side of it, we'll have a much better nation and a much better life. Think of the current Russian republics and what life is like there versus what it was like under Stalin. In the Soviet Union. All right, so Dave, I got to let you go. We've got to take a break for station identification. Back with hour number 3 after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're talking about the economy now. And apparently over in Great Britain, rough sleeping, which is what they call homelessness, has reached record levels, with figures published on Thursday showing an annual increase of 15%, meaning that homelessness in Great Britain has increased 169% since 2010, over the last 8 years. And it's no longer confined to London and the big cities. More and more, they're finding people sleeping rough in tents and shop doorways in towns where you wouldn't expect to see homeless people. Now, out in California, an illegal alien who was working as an Uber driver has been arrested for 4 rapes, and police suspect that there were probably even more than that. Now, article coming out of Investment Watch blog, illegal immigration destroys American schools and hurts kids the most. And basically, the article looks at what's going on, again, in California. California spends $88.3 billion on its K-12 public education system. But even with all that money, the schools are the worst in the country. California has one of the highest student-to-teacher ratios in America, 35% above the national average, and per-pupil spending has been decreasing steadily. A recent study ranked California's K-12 public education system as the 37th worst in the union in terms of educational quality and 49th in terms of school safety. Now, everybody's out there saying, oh, it's because, we've got to raise taxes, we don't have enough money. But no, the problem is the illegal immigration, because these kids are coming on in to the school. They're filling up the classrooms. They're not contributing to the school budget. Most of their parents are working but not paying taxes. And these kids are going to school, and they're just using up all the available resources and filling up the classrooms. And apparently that's also a reason why California's schools are so unsafe, because of the racial friction that's brought on in. Now, another big problem that we're dealing with in this country is what is illegal immigrants who are making money here and sending it home. So it's not even being spent here. It's just disappearing. It's not redistribution, it is removal. And apparently somebody did the calculation and said right now the illegal immigrant population of the United States of America is sending $38 billion with a B out of the country every single year. We can't survive that either. Especially, we're already sending $1.5 billion out of the country every single day with a trade imbalance. Polls are showing 80% of Americans want less immigration. They want all of this nonsense shut down. And the globalists are still out there screaming, oh, you're just being racist. I'm not being a racist. I want strong borders on this country for the same reason I have locks on the door of my house. I want to control who comes in and goes out, and for what purpose. That's just common sense here. Now, over in Germany, as you know, Angela Merkel is trying to form a coalition between her party, the CDU, and the other major party, the SPD. And it's coming up on a referendum. And all of a sudden, there's a surprising phenomenon that young people are signing up for the SPD. They're becoming members of that party, swelling the membership ranks huge. And apparently, the idea is they're going to vote to change the direction of the SPD. They're going to vote against the coalition and deny Angela Merkel a fourth term as chancellor. These are people who are just as angry about their refugee crisis as we are about the illegal immigrant crisis and refugees in this country. Now, here's a story. This is kind of weird. This is civil forfeiture on steroids. Police in the Dutch city of Rotterdam have launched a new pilot program which will see them confiscating clothing and jewelry from young people that they don't think ought to be able to afford them. I'm not kidding. If the police look at you and they take a guess about what your social status is and you're wearing a really nice coat or a really nice wristwatch, the police are just going to take it. It's just like here in the United States, where if the police catch you with anything over, I think it's $5,000, they'll just take it on the assumption that you must be doing something wrong. And now they're doing it with clothes. And apparently in an interview, somebody said, well, we saw this kid with a Rolex. Well, just so that you know, there are counterfeit Rolexes. There are fakes. And I know this because when we were working on Lost, one of our characters was supposed to be wearing a Rolex, and they didn't want to spend the money to get a real Rolex, so they went out and they got a couple of the counterfeits, which were very, very inexpensive. And those were what were actually used on the show. Here's how you tell a counterfeit Rolex from a real Rolex. A real Rolex has a sweep second that just moves smoothly. The counterfeit Rolexes, it just ticks from second to second. That's the first way that you tell you're looking at a fake. But this is ridiculous. They're going around. If you don't look like you could actually afford what they're wearing, they're going to strip you right there in the middle of the street. Recently, declassified documents have shown that Great Britain supported the dictator Pinochet in Chile after the U.S. coup d'etat against Allende put Pinochet in power. And Pinochet was a full-blown dictator. A lot of people disappeared, a lot of atrocities, a lot of brutal beatings, and apparently Great Britain was perfectly okay with this. And there we are. Now, I actually mentioned this. I was on Richie Allen this morning. I'm very glad that all these movie stars have come on out saying that all of this screaming about sexual abuse is just hypocrisy. Brigitte Bardot's come on out. Catherine Deneuve has come on out. A lot of other people coming on out saying, look, it's ridiculous. These girls try and seduce producers and directors to get the parts they want, and then they turn around and scream that they're being sexually harassed. And there was a lot of that. But over in France, and it's getting even more ridiculous, over in France, which when I was a kid was sort of the icon of open sexuality and freedom, there's a new law. If a man comments about a woman's body or appearance in public, he'll be fined 90 euros. If you're in public and you tell a woman, and this is a law that's under proposal, but it's probably going to pass if you look at some of the weird things they've been doing over there lately. But if this law passes, and you're out in public and you tell a woman, boy, you look really beautiful, 90 euro fine. This is just getting insane. They're trying to isolate men and women from each other. Ironically, at the same time, they're trying to get all the gays and the transgenders and all these others to basically stand up and say, we're all united. Now, the police over in Las Vegas have finally admitted in their preliminary report, which was issued just a few days ago, there was at least one other shooter up in that hotel. Now, remember when this all went down and the official story was crazed lone nut shooter, Stephen Paddock. That's all there was. Any other suggestions? Kooky conspiracy theories. And I kept pointing out there are two broken out windows in two adjacent rooms, and the door that would connect the two rooms and turn it into a larger suite appeared to be locked in the photos that they let on out. Well, now the police are saying, yes, there was a second shooter or shooters in the room adjacent to where Stephen Paddock had his end suite. And they made their escape out the front door and exited the building, according to apparently a very vague portion of this report. So now they're acknowledging there were multiple shooters. Amazing stuff here. Down in Florida, they're looking at a proposal that could force new HPV vaccine requirements for state public school students. And it's SB 1558, the School Health Immunizations, also known as the Women's Cancer Prevention Act, revises child immunization requirements to include a vaccine for human papillomavirus. And this has caused a huge upset for a lot of people because it's well known that, first of all, for most of these school grades, they're not exposed to the virus because they're not sexually active. And the shot only lasts a few years. So why not wait and give it to them when they become sexually active? But a lot of people are very concerned because of all the damage that this vaccine can cause. We've heard all these stories coming out of Europe and even here in the United States where these perfectly healthy women suffer permanent harm. Narcolepsy, mental illness, all kinds of deterioration. And parents are basically out there saying that if this bill passes, they're going to start taking their kids out of school and they're going to homeschool. And I'm perfectly in agreement on this one. Vaccinations for a child should be up to the parents. And I know the government thinks we're all morons and idiots and we can't possibly know what's going on better than they do, except that we very often usually do, because all they do is talk. Take money and deliver the promise. But you look at the damage that the already mandated vaccines are causing. Here's another story. Absolute, undeniable proof mercury is still used in vaccines injected into children. And apparently this story is found a letter authored by Secretary Diana S. Dooley, and dated October 9th, 2015, from the State of California Health and Human Services. And basically in this letter, approval was granted to inject children with mercury-laced vaccines containing thimerosal. And basically what the letter says, because the current supply of thimerosal-free vaccine was running out, that they were granting an exemption from California Health and Safety Code section 124172 for seasonal influenza vaccine with trace levels of thimerosal. Sorry, I'm getting rented lips here. And they authorized it for children younger than 3 years, which is in that period where the myelin sheaths have not fully formed, when the mercury can do the most damage. There is still no federal law or FDA ruling that requires the removal of mercury from vaccines. Mercury is highly toxic. It's a neurotoxin. Ever hear the expression mad as a hatter? Remember the character, the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland? That's based on a real, true fact. Back when Alice in Wonderland was being written, milliners, hat makers, would take fur from animals like beaver, and they would make felt out of it. But before they could make it into felt, they had to soak it in mercury, because that would make the little scales on the hairs stand up, so that they would tangle more completely and form a stronger felt. And then the felt would be blocked into the shape of the hat. And because of their constant exposure to the mercury, people who made hats for a living over time became mentally deranged. Hence the expression, mad as a hatter. And they're still injecting this stuff into kids 3 years old and younger. Right there is a good example of why vaccine decisions should be left up to the parents. The only reason that thimerosal is in there is to cut loss, to increase profits. It's a preservative. It's not even there for therapeutic benefit. It's just to keep the vaccine longer on a shelf so they don't have to throw it away and waste the money. That's why it's there. Apparently the snowfall over in Tokyo has been very intense. Apparently it's the heaviest since 2014. Apparently it's brought the city to a standstill. Cars are trapped in a tunnel, and that caused a huge traffic jam from Monday evening through Tuesday morning. Parts of expressways around the capital were closed. 50 vehicles stranded on Tokyo's iconic Rainbow Bridge. So it's pretty heavy. Now, over in Davos, of course, they're out there saying that human-caused global warming is maybe the number one, number two challenge that we face today. And, of course, all these people out there pushing human-caused global warming and taxation flew into Davos on their private jets, their Gulfstream GXs. And, of course, the bigger the jet, the more status they have. Obviously, Donald Trump with his 747 won that particular competition. But somebody did a head count. There are just over 1,000 private jets on those 4 runways that serve Davos. So apparently they're all worried about the planet's carbon footprint, but not their own. Down in Florida, they're actually out snowing Edmonton, Alberta. Now, it's not a competition that anybody wants to get into, let alone win. But apparently, down in Pace, Santa Rosa County, Florida, is supposed to have an average high temperature of 16 degrees or 60.8 degrees Fahrenheit and an average snowfall of 0 inches in January. And now they're getting it. Now, this one is ridiculous. This one was actually on the TV network news, okay? The global warming people now want to have a luxury tax on all meat. It's another tax. And their reasoning is sandwiches are causing global warming. I am not kidding you. This is not The Onion. They're out there saying that sandwiches are causing global warming and the meat is to blame. I'm pretty sure this has something to do with the methane. But they're talking about an excise taxes on beef, pork, and chicken. And basically, it's a continuation of what they're calling the sin tax, which are aimed at cigarettes, alcoholic beverages, and gambling. We're just more taxes on everything. Well, no, apparently they're saying that the sandwiches, for some reason, are responsible for the equivalent annual carbon emissions of 8.6 million cars in Britain alone. I seriously doubt that. I thought they'd be yelling about methane, but then their favorite gas is carbon dioxide. But that's ridiculous. That is utterly, utterly ridiculous. The idea of a sin tax is ridiculous. It's just government's unbridled greed under any excuse to get more of your money. That's why they started this whole global warming thing, to get you to pay a tax on carbon. It's just more scams for more of your money. Okay, now I have a flashback story from 2012, and basically the American government made an odd request of two leading scientific publications to censor research. This was Nature, British Journal, and Science, the American one, were about to publish studies by two separate teams which had been tinkering with H5N1 influenza, better known as the bird flu, to produce a strain that might be able to pass through the air between humans. Why on earth are you working on an air transmissible bird flu? But that's what they were working on. And the American government basically said, just put the vague overview in there, and only vetted scientists could see the actual details. It was a very wise and prudent thing to do. I agree with that. But why are they weaponizing the and they've been doing this since 2012. There have actually been incidents where there have been mistakes at these biological warfare labs, and it's triggered a small pandemic around the facility. This is dangerous stuff. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And almost 2 weeks ago, we had that big scare here in Hawaii where the Emergency Management Agency sent out an alert that a ballistic missile was coming on in. Seek shelter. This is no drill. Scared a lot of people. At least one known heart attack resulted in death. And it took 38 minutes for the Emergency Management Agency to put out a correction. And they blamed it originally on FEMA, saying we had to wait for FEMA permission. FEMA says, no, you don't. You can put out a correction for an error message immediately all on your own. That's ridiculous. Hawaii's Governor Aiea was under fire for taking 27 minutes to put out the correction on his Twitter account. And he basically claimed he forgot his Twitter password. Well, the FCC is investigating what happened because it does involve the telephone and television video, cable system. And apparently, the FCC is now saying that the individual who sent out that missile alert is refusing to cooperate with the FCC investigation. Now, if it was just a stupid accident on a computer menu, why would this person not just say to the FCC it was a stupid accident on a computer menu? I am still of the opinion, and this is because they had a similar accident 2 days later in Japan. I think it was a test. I think they put out the alert, and then they were watching how the people of Hawaii were going to react to the missile alert, whether for civil defense planning or getting ready for a false flag or who the heck really knows. But that's very interesting here. Now, apparently, Donald Trump has reached a compromise position. Remember, this budget shutdown and the emergency spending was only for 3 weeks. And the Democrats were literally saying there has to be something done about immigration or we'll just shut it down again. So President Trump has proposed a plan that will provide a path to citizenship for 1.8 million of the dreamer immigrants. The plan includes tighter restrictions on legal immigration and $25 billion for border security, the cost of his wall. And he's putting forward this outline, which is probably not going to make anybody happy, but at least he's making some efforts in that direction here. Now, getting on back to California, as you know, as of the first of the year, recreational marijuana is now legal in the state. Some local communities apparently decided that was not going to happen. So up in Calaveras County, and you probably remember it from the writings of Mark Twain, the celebrated jumping fraud of Calaveras County, that place. And apparently on the January 10th, supervisors in Calaveras County basically declared all commercial cannabis farms illegal. The problem was that there are already numerous legal cannabis farms that were previously supplying the medical marijuana market, and now they're supplying the recreational market. And basically, the county of Calaveras just cut off 20% of their operating revenue that was being collected as taxes from these farms. And the county really can't afford that. And basically the supervisors are saying that all of these people who have built these businesses growing cannabis, they're going to have to shut down by May 1st. Well, that prompted recall efforts. And apparently 2 county supervisors who played a key role in banning pot in Calaveras County. It's not just the pot farms. They don't want you smoking it in their county. And they were served with notices of intent to recall them at a board meeting in San Andreas. And there are 2 separate recall groups led by Jeremy Maddox of District 4 and Joan Wilson of District 1, and they served supervisors Dennis Mills of District 4 and Gary Tofanelli of District 1 recall notices after both campaigns obtained more than the required 20 signatures since last week in support of their efforts. So it looks like there's going to be a shakeup, which is good. The will of the people is the law of the land. And even the Democrats seem to have forgotten that. So I'm glad they're standing up and fighting back. I wish they would legalize pot in this state, because we got some of the best, I've heard. Remember that automated cashierless grocery store Amazon put up, the Amazon Go, and the idea was that you would flash your cell phone to identify yourself as you walked into the store, and then you just go around picking up what you wanted, putting it in your basket, and the computers and the cameras would track you and charge your credit card that was on file. So far, so good. Well, it's not really working out all that well, and it's been discovered that customers are accidentally shoplifting because they're putting stuff in the cart and it's being missed by the computer sensors, the computer vision, and so it's not working out as well. I guess Amazon's got a curse on it, certainly to look at Whole Foods you'd think so. We're going to take another break, back with more after this. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and already the pushback against Trump's new immigration plan, because he still wants his wall, and they're running a story now that, a border wall will disrupt this wildlife refuge. The environmentalists have their knickers in a twist. Everybody's whining about something. I'm sorry, I want to put Americans first. I want to put human beings first. Okay, and everything else sort of falls in down below that here. Now, for some strange reason, up in Ontario, their regional transit operator, Metrolinx, claimed they had fallen victim to a North Korean cyber attack. Now, Metrolinx and the Ontario government have offered no evidence to back up that claim. And the lack of information has made it difficult to understand the severity of the attack, let alone how Metrolinx concluded North Korea was to blame. I mean, if you talk cybersecurity experts, they'll tell you that finding out who's really behind a cyber attack is very, very, very hard. But this sounds like it's more propaganda. We've got to demonize North Korea. Oh, North Korea is to blame for everything that Russia didn't do wrong. It's another indication that somebody somewhere is thinking about a war. Now, it's come on out that Intel actually alerted computer makers to these problems on their chips all the way back on November 29th, which was the same day that Intel's CEO sold off his shares. I think that edges up very close to insider trading. There's a new malware out there. It's called Crossrat, and apparently it is a cross-platform remote access Trojan that can infect Windows, Solaris, Linux, and Mac OS. And basically, it uses social engineering via posts on Facebook groups and WhatsApp messages, encouraging users or tricking users to visit hackers-controlled fake websites and download malicious applications. It is really a jungle out there. Now, there is a little bit of good news because that teenage hacker who basically used social engineering, which is a fancy word for lying and talking your way through and pretending to be somebody that the other person would trust. But apparently he's pled guilty to 10 charges. Basically Kane Gamble, who was the founder of hacker collective Crackers with Attitude, was able to access classified documents from former CIA Director John Brennan. And he claimed he was motivated by American injustices perpetrated around the world. In fact, he mentions Palestine quite often. There's been another article out here about censorship by weaponizing free speech. And the article goes on back and says that when the internet first came along, everybody said it was going to be a wide open forum, free speech, purest expression of democracy. Then we had to deal with the spammers. And that basically opened the door, saying that, yes, content could be moderated. And certainly everybody agrees that spammers, who are just there to make trouble, should be filtered on out so that you get a better quality of information. But now, unfortunately, we're now seeing the filtering take on a political dimension, targeting conservative thought. Now, there's another article that came on out, this is in City Journal, of crudeness and truth. And it's saying there's nothing wrong with plain talk. There's nothing wrong with telling the truth. And basically saying that liberals are living in a fantasy world where men and women are identical, where black Americans commit no more crimes than white Americans, that Muslims don't commit terror attacks. And when you try and talk to them about the real world with the facts, they jump up and they scream and they cry. This is racism. This is sexism. You're expressing some kind of phobia. I'm shocked to find facts being spoken in polite company. And it's a form of bullying. It's like when Israel screams, you're a Jew hater or you're an anti-Semite. It's designed to get you to shut up because they don't want anyone to hear what you're saying. And so it's time to return to plain talk. It's time to get away from all this so-called political correctness, because political correctness is really a form of cultural Marxism, of tricking us into voluntarily, of our own free will, censoring ourselves. I mean, the liberals certainly have no hesitation to put out their ideas and speak their mind. They're only upset when conservatives do it. Now, apparently, somebody has come up with a bricklaying robot. It's called SAM, for semi-automated mason. It's starting to show up on a handful of sites in America, and these machines are capable of laying up to 3,000 bricks a day, compared with the human average of 500. So, more displacement of work. I can understand the attraction of being able to do 6 times as many bricks in a day. Apparently, there's a massive security flaw in Tinder that could let strangers hijack your photos, spy on your swipes, and see pictures of all your matches. And Tinder apparently was informed of the flaws in November. It has yet to provide a fix. It's all just falling apart. And I was saying before, we've allowed our technology to become decadent. We've allowed it to become too complex to be managed easily and effectively. Apparently, there's a new botnet recruiting malware out there. It's called Masuta, and it's crawling around the web looking for routers with weak credentials. And that's a reminder. If you have a router, change the default password, because those default passwords are known all over the web. That's the first step in securing your local area network, is change that default password. And apparently, according to New Skies analysis, this attack comes in two flavors. Masuta, which takes the standard Internet of Things approach to tapping devices for default credentials. And then there's the more sophisticated Pure Masuta, which exploits an old network administration bug. Now, here's an interesting little story. This came on out of Citizens Free Press. Apparently up in Canada, Canada Rail, there was a train conductor who was fired because on her social media posts, she was posting sexy photos of herself. And I looked at the photos. No nudity, nothing pornography. She was in a bikini with like a jacket over it, and she was posed next to trains because she works as a conductor. And Canadian Rail has fired her. That was exactly the wrong thing to do because she looks good. They should have basically made a calendar out of her. The rail companies are always screaming and complaining that they're trying to compete with the airline companies and the bus lines. This lady makes a good argument to ride the rails again. Canada's got a good rail system. I saw a lot of it in Vancouver. There was this beautiful locomotive, it was dark green. Anyway, do you remember the film Bullet back in 1968? And it starred Steve McQueen, and there was this amazing car chase through San Francisco where the cars were flying up in the air and was bouncing around. And it turns out a lot of people were trying to figure out where that Mustang went that Steve McQueen drove in the movie, and it has actually been found. It was bought and kept in a garage by a New Jersey insurance executive back in 1974. And Robert Kyman, the executive, saw an advertisement in Road and Track magazine where somebody was saying, "Where is this car now? We want to find it." And he basically called up and said, "Yeah, I've got it." So I would imagine that he is going to be very happy because the car's estimated worth to a car museum is now $5 million. This is why you should never throw away any old things here. Russia has announced that starting sometime after 2019, they're going to build their own new space station without the United States and Europe. It won't be international technically, although friends will be able to show on up. And Russia is basically stepping up their civilian space program. They're going to launch 5 modules to start the space station. And the head of Roscosmos is saying Russia would launch 150 satellites into space until 2025. That's a lot of space activity. Now, this raises the question, what about our current space station? Well, everything sent up there does have a life expectancy. We saw that with Mirror. We saw that with Skylab. And eventually, the International Space Station is either going to have to be refurbished extensively or brought down. And they're talking about bringing it down because it's easier to just build an all-new space station and put it on up. Part of the problem is that the near-Earth environment is very hostile, and they're not able to build yet a space station that can basically endure in the environment of the extreme heat, the extreme cold, the radiation, the micrometeors. They've actually had problems where the gloves on the spacesuits are getting slashed by these microscopic craters left by micrometeorites in the metal handrails. And so they're having to deal with that. I remember there was an experiment during the space shuttle program called LDEF, the Long Duration Exposure Facility, that simply left a frame of materials in orbit to see how they would hold up to the Earth environment. And because of the Challenger disaster, it stayed up there 7 years. And by the time they retrieved it, most of those panels were absolutely empty of whatever had been put in them. So they're saying that sometime after 2024, the current International Space Station is going to have to come on down. And it will be directed to land to an unoccupied part of the Pacific Ocean, but it is going to basically be coming on down with some 100 tons of components still intact, not vaporized by the trip through the atmosphere and not burned away. So that will be spectacular. Now, story here, brass check, and it's talking about yet again in California, where there was this family farm, the Healthy Family Farms, and they produced and sold raw goat milk dairy products, raw cow milk, and brought from Pennsylvania to their club members. It's a membership store, and people who belong to the Right to Choose Healthy Foods Rawsome Club sign a membership agreement that says, I understand this is raw milk product, I'm not concerned about it. But apparently the police raided the place, even though it is perfectly legal to sell these products in California. Nobody complained, nobody got sick. The police just raided the place, confiscated business records and product, and this looks like just flat out fascist shutting down competition to the large food corporations. There doesn't seem to be any other reason for this to have happened. I hope this family sues. I hope they win. I hope the courts decide to make these police personally financially liable for this. Because this is just heavy-handed fascism, if you will. Now, apparently, Monsanto is being accused of being behind a recent Newsweek article credited to Dr. Henry I. Miller of the Hoover Institution, basically saying that the campaign for organic food, it's deceitful, it's an expensive scam, all these people are phonies, and just really rails on the idea of anybody wanting to eat natural, organic, healthy food without all the chemicals and additives that supermarket food tends to have. Well, it turns out this guy, Dr. Henry Miller, has a past record of being supplied with pre-written articles by Monsanto and then publishing them under his own name. The last time he did it was in Forbes magazine, where he basically attacked the scientists of the World Health Organization's cancer panel for the decision to list glyphosate as a probable human carcinogen. So Monsanto is still up to their dirty tricks, and you're always going to find somebody with a science degree who's willing to sell out their integrity. And you need to understand, because of this fascist government that we live under and the idea of money above all other concerns, we are fed a lot of food that is banned in the rest of the world. Hormone-infused American beef in milk, it's considered a cancer hazard. It's banned in the European Union, Japan, Australia, and China. You've heard about pink slime. It's this prefabricated material to make burgers. And it's used as an additive to bulk up cheap meat, because there's things in there that aren't necessarily meat, like cartilage. It's found in hot dogs, burgers, and it's more likely to carry pathogens because it's pulled from the bones. And it's banned in the European Union. GMO food, we know the problems with that, banned in Austria, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Luxembourg, Russia, and China. Carrageenan, used as an emulsifier and thickener in processed dairy goods, including baby formula, causes gastrointestinal inflammation, which can be dangerous to young children. Banned in infant formulas in the European Union. Atrazine, one of the most widely used herbicides in the U.S. This particular herbicide is notorious because it's been known to leak through the ground and contaminate drinking water. Like other herbicides, small doses also transfer into humans via the crops. Banned in the European Union. Arsenic-laced chicken. What they'll do is they'll take a chicken and expose it to arsenic because it makes the blood vessels appear pinker and makes the meat look fresher. That's the reason. But arsenic is a poison. And arsenic-laced chicken manure is commonly used to feed cows, and which means they're getting the arsenic as well, banned in the European Union. Pork infused with asthma medication called ractopamine. It's a drug that makes its way into most pig and cattle feed. It's basically causes weight gain, increased heart rate, insomnia, headaches, and tremors. Banned, unsurprisingly, has been banned in the European Union, Russia, and China. And it goes on and on and on. The brominated vegetable oil in toxic energy drinks is a problem. It's banned in over 100 countries. Coal tar, banned in much of the European Union. Chicken washed in chlorine, banned in the European Union. Fat-free chips are a problem as well. All right, we got to take another commercial break. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today here. Here's an interesting little story. Somebody got a really cool idea here. Apparently, a group of German promoters are planning to have a nightclub party at 0G. And what it is that Germany has a modified Airbus A310 that is normally used to train astronauts. It's like the American Vomit Comet. And apparently they're decorating the interior of this aircraft. It's going to have 25 guests and some DJs that would be playing the music, apparently on modified equipment that won't be bothered by the 0G. And the entire event is going to last 90 minutes, and they're predicting that the clubbers can expect 25 minutes of weightlessness as their aircraft maneuvers up and down at extreme high altitude. I think that's cool. I'd love to do that. Okay, getting on back to some more serious stuff. Apparently, Montpelier High School will fly a Black Lives Matter flag for the entire month of February. Kind of a little interesting there. I saw this story a while back, a day or two ago, but I'm going to go with it here. Apparently, CNN on their website had an article promoting cuckolding. Now, it's become an insult of the so-called alt-right aimed at men who are viewed as spineless and emasculated. But basically, the original meaning, it has an adulterous partner. But there was this article that said there was a recent study by David Lay, Justin Lemiller, and the writer Dan Savage. Acting on cuckolding fantasies can be a largely positive experience for many couples and is hardly a sign of weakness. Well, everybody who's into the group sex scene knows that. It's just what arrangement do you have with your spouse? And my arrangement with Claire is we are monogamous. I don't fool around. I like my life simple. But I've been in open relations when I was much, much younger. Okay, so more and more about this secret society. Again, there's an informant, an FBI whistleblower, who's out there saying, yes, this actually did happen, and apparently it extended to the Department of Justice. This is major. This is major. We're talking about FBI agents and Justice Department officials actively seeking to overthrow the President of the United States of America. And apparently the push is on to get that Feyza memo cleared and released, despite the Department of Justice rebuke and despite the claim that we're all too dumb to understand what it means. So again, my usual sign-off for the show, which I'm coming up on, it is vitally important that Americans come to understand what is going on. And they're not going to get it off the TV news. So this is a call to Rivero's Rangers. You've got to get this stuff into emails, chat boards, social media. Have it on hard copy on paper that you can show to people who really don't know how to use a computer. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Please stay tuned to John Stedmiller. He's got a lot of stuff to share with you. And we'll be back here tomorrow on Republic Broadcasting. And I'm sorry to say the Lady Claire will not be able to join us. She's still dealing with a lot of back pain. And I'm just trying to take the best care of her that I can. So I'll talk to you tomorrow, and aloha, America.